we are back and we are going to be doing the next set of group of 5 teams. We've already gone through Boise State, Cincinnati, Houston, Notre Dame, BYU, UCF, and Fresno State. And we're going to be doing the next set of teams here. You can see on the graphic if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, just follow along. We're going to start here with another team sitting at their 8.5 win total here, the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. And I'll be going first here with the Cajuns. I am going to have the under here for this team. And this one I actually am fairly confident about. I was surprised to see this win total this high. And I think the main reason why I am bearish on this team is that, of course, they lost their head coach, Billy Napier, to Florida, and he took the entire staff with him. They lost a lot of players. A lot of their key players, a lot of their good players transferred out to Power 5 schools, and they only returned 46% of their production, which is 123rd in FPS. And the head coach, the new head coach, is going to be Michael DeSormo. I don't know if I pronounced his name right.
I'll help you with the. It'd probably be DeSormo. DeSormo. So no, you nailed it. Nice.
He was promoted to head coach, and he has no prior head coaching experience. So that's certainly a question mark there. And as I've said, with that, in addition to all the departures and the transfer portal departures as well, their toughest non-con game is they got to go to Tallahassee and play at Florida State late in the season. And besides that, their schedule really isn't that tough, but I just think this team is going to regress a ton. If you look at the numbers last year, they went 7-0 in one possession games. They went 7-0 in one possession games. So when I saw that, I was like, maybe this team's record was a lot better than what it actually was. So I think this team is just due for a ton of regression, and 8.5. I mean, I got to go under here for Louisiana.
It sounds like they were the anti-Nebraska.
Right, exactly.
Right there. Well, let me preface to all my Louisiana friends, my Lafayette friends. I love UL. I enjoy the city. It's beautiful. I'm not going to go on anymore. As much as I love the Ragin' Cajuns, I mean, John, you nailed it. DeSormo, he's got no experience besides being on Billy's staff. You're most under, so let's get that out of the way. I'm definitely under 8.5. This should have been at 6 if you asked me. Your most successful coach in school history is gone, and it's not like you had an heir apparent ready to go. You're 126 out of 131 in returning production, and a quarterback, Levi Lewis, he's out of there, so you don't even have at least the quarterback to serve as an anchor. In addition, again with the scheduling, your non-con is basically a breeze except for Florida State, and I don't think this is a Florida State team that's going to lose to a Sun Belt team. I think they're putting those days behind them. I truly do. Shout out to my sister on that one and her Seminoles. But you also have to go on the road for Marshall and Southern Miss, and that's tough. I mean, those are decent now new Sun Belt teams, you know. And also, fun fact, Southern Miss is a 9-game win streak against the Cajun for whatever stock you want to put into winning streaks in college football. And I think between Troy and Georgia Southern, two traditionally decent, above average Sun Belt teams, I think they split those games, even being at home. So, yeah, I'm really confident that the Ragin' Cajuns are not going to win over 8.5 games. And it pains me to say that because I really do love that university and that area of Louisiana.
So we both agree with Louisiana under 8.5. So next up are the Air Force Academy Falcons. Their line is set at 8.5. Zach, what do you got here for Air Force?
Dude, is always super grateful for what the Air Force does. Mad respect. They've definitely improved as a football team, and that's really cool to see. But unfortunately, I got to go against our men in the sky on this one. I took the under, and it was difficult for me to peg this one. I mean, yes, they won double-digit games in 2019 and 21, so recently they've been great. However, they've only passed this mark just 4 times since the Troy Calhoun era began in 2007. So yes, it's been the recency, but it really hasn't been the norm. And I just don't see less than 3 losses. I just don't think they're going to sweep Boise State and Fresno State. And although, given what you said about Fresno State, maybe that's the one they win. But and Army and Navy are always toss-ups. I'm sorry. The battle for the Commanders Cup, the Commanders in Chief Cup, I mean, they play that hard. And how those offenses are run, Army and Navy are a tough bet. There's a reason teams are weary about scheduling them in the non-con. And also Colorado, yes, they're not the class of the Pac-12, but playing them in Boulder, I mean, that's still a challenge. And so for that reason, I'm going under on the Falcons.
So I'm going to disagree with you here. I actually am going to
Okay.
go over. I think Air
Okay.
Force can get to 9 wins. And I do kind of like Troy Calhoun. I think he's honestly pretty an underrated head coach. I mean, he's in his 16th season going into at Air Force, and they got a very high standard there. They always make bowl games. You know, there's a high floor there with Troy Calhoun at the helm. Last year they went 10-3, and they were very efficient. They were very efficient on both sides of the ball, and they do return a lot of key players, which I did like. Their non-conference, I feel like, is pretty doable. They got Northern Iowa at home, which should be a win. They got Colorado at home as well, and I don't think this Colorado team is going to be very good. I think they can beat Colorado. In fact, they might even be favored against Colorado. They got Navy and Army. Again, you did say that those teams are tough to play, and I do agree with that. I think they can win at least one of those. They play Army at Globe Life, which is pretty interesting. And then they got Boise State at home. So one of their toughest Mountain West opponents, they got at home, which I think is also good to play into their favor. So for those reasons, kind of more so the scheduling dynamic for me is why I'm going to play the over here. But again, I don't really have a strong lean here with Air Force. Now back into the Sun Belt. We're going to go back east to Appalachian State, the Mountaineers. I am going to go under on this one. And this one was very tough for me. I was very, very close to picking the over here. This is a very, very weak endorsement of the under for me because I could be totally wrong about this. But App State, they went 10-4 last year. They lost the Sun Belt Championship to Louisiana. Head coach Sean Clark's, I believe, in his third season there right now. He's a good head coach. They do return their quarterback, Chase Bryce, which I think is a positive, but they do lose their top 3 pass catchers from last season. So they lose a lot of passing. They lose a lot of receiving production, I should say, from last year. The defense should be improved, which is a good thing. But then I went ahead and looked at their schedule. Their first 2 games, they open up with North Carolina at home, and then they got to go at Texas A&M. I probably see 2 losses in the works there, though they could surprise UNC at home. I think they definitely lose to A&M on the road. And then they got to go back-to-back midseason. They got to go back-to-back at Coastal Carolina and then at Marshall, which I think could be difficult. And another reason, too, is why, even though I'm not confident about this, it just seems hard for me to pick App State to get to 9 wins when I think the Sun Belt just as a whole will be a lot more competitive now because you have the additions of James Madison, Marshall, Southern Miss, Old Dominion. I think the conference now has a lot more depth, and I think App State's going to have a lot more week-to-week hardships and week-to-week toughness that they're going to have to go through than what they're used to. So again, I'm going to go under, but not very confident about it.
I completely get that, John. I'll tell you, we definitely gave the listeners a little more spice in this side of the bracket because I'm going over. Our friends on cover 3 may not have the same faith, but I am putting my faith in Chase Bryce. He threw for nearly 3,400 yards last year with 27 tutties and 11 picks. And scheduling, yeah, I mean that's a tough draw with UNC and A&M. But honestly, you can afford to lose to those 2 and even Coastal and still hit the 9-win mark. And a lot of what pushes that is you get the Citadel, you get Robert Morris, and I know James Madison's been an FCS powerhouse, but there is something to be said about having to jump up a level and the talent difference, even if you're jumping to the group of 5. And I think James Madison I think they'll be a very competitive and a decent team at the G5 level, but I think they'll have a year or 2 of growing pains making that adjustment. And also, the last time that App State didn't win 9 games was 2014. So I'm sticking with the trends. I'm sticking with the consistency of this program. And I think the Mountaineers can get to 9 wins and maybe regain control of the Sun Belt with teams with UL taking a step back. But like you said, with UL taking a step back, now you've got other teams taking a step forward to enter the mix. But I still think the Mountaineers can get it done and get to 9 this year.
That's actually very impressive that they've gone with at least 9 wins in each of the last, or since 2014 is what you said. And that's under multiple different head coaches as well.
And that's a non-con. That's like Miami, UNC, who they beat. They beat UNC and South Carolina in the same year. I mean,
Right.
they don't mess. I mean, yeah, you see, like Citadel, Robert Morris. this year. But like you traditionally, they do not mess around with non-con, as evidenced with A&M in North Carolina. So no, I got mad respect for the Mountaineer program, and I think Boone's going to be popping uh, this year. And the loss of the team, what they do lose, will be tough competitive games. This team's not getting blown out.
I agree. And the more and more I talk about it, I feel like I want to reverse my pick here. It doesn't feel right to pick the under for App State. So I won't be that upset if I'm wrong about that one. Definitely rolling the dice. Now, next up, we're going to go into Conference USA, UAB, the Blazers, sitting at 8.5 as well. What's your take on these guys?
Well, I'll tell you, John, I got a heart for UAB, just their story, with having not have a program, then they come back and they're a very competitive group of five team. They won 8 games last year, which kind of felt like a down year for them that year. And this year, yeah, they're 96 in returning production. And I'm going over. So I'm going over on the win total. So let's get that out of the way. But outside of LSU, I don't see 3 other definitive losses, which gives them leeway to drop 2 conference games against UTSA and whoever else. And they have UTSA at home, and Barry lost to them last year. So I think UAB, and they're playing Liberty this year, and they're absolutely going to take it to Liberty, I think. What happened, I mean, especially when their stadium opening got spoiled by Liberty, I think they get their revenge. So I think UAB maintains being the class of Conference USA and definitely beats this threshold. And I'm taking the over.
I like it. I also am going to take the over on this UAB team. They went 9-4 last season, like you said. Bill Clark, I think he's one of the best head coaches in all of college football. That's P5 and G5. Returns for his 7th season at the helm here at UAB. Defense last year was pretty solid, though. I will say one little bit of a red flag for me is that their defensive line lost a lot of good sack production. However, they do return quarterback Dylan Hopkins, who was pretty good last season. He was one of the best G5 quarterbacks. I think Dylan Hopkins is a very good player. He throws the ball deep a lot, and he's pretty accurate while he does it too. And they're scheduled, the non-conference, they got Alabama A&M, which should be a win, at Liberty, like you just said, Georgia Southern, and then they got to go at LSU late in the season. That'll probably be a loss, but I think one key component to this schedule is that they have UTSA at home. UTSA won Conference USA last year. So they got the Roadrunners at home. And I think the CUSA conference as a whole, I think it'll be down this year after losing 3 teams to the Sun Belt. So I don't feel like it'll be as competitive this year. And I think that's really going to separate those teams like UAB and UTSA. So that's why I got the over here. I think they can get to 9 wins. And again, that's another endorsement of Bill Clark. I think he's a very good head coach. And now to UTSA, the Roadrunners, as I just mentioned, also at 8.5. I'm going over as well. I think both of these teams will be at the top of Conference USA this season. UTSA, as I just mentioned, they went 12-2 last year, won Conference USA, and Jeff Traylor, the breakout season last year, he returns as the head coach for his 3rd season in San Antonio. And there's a lot to like about this Roadrunner team, especially offensively. They got a lot of offensive production coming back. Quarterback Frank Harris, their leading receivers, Zachariah Franklin and Joshua Cephas return as well. And the defense, I think, will probably take a step back from last year. But I think the offense was a top 25 offense last year. I think they can be even better going into this year. So the offense is going to need to carry them, of course, to get to this over on the win total here. The beginning of the season is a little bit rough for the Roadrunners. They open up against Houston at home, which at least they're home for that game, but we both are high on Houston. They got to go at Army next, and they go at Texas. So those first 3 games, we're going to learn a lot about this Roadrunner team. And if they can pull out at least 1 win from that stretch, if they can pull out 2 wins from that stretch, this over is hitting. That's going to be the sign that UTSA is off to a good season. And they also got to play at UAB later on too, as I mentioned earlier. So the schedule makes me draw back a little bit, but I'm just going to still say that this offense is good enough to get those 9 wins.
John, I thought about UTSA for a while, and I agree. I mean, I'm going over. I do not think last year was a fluke. I think it was a statement by Traylor, and I think he's doing something really special at UTSA. The team that's what's coming back. 77% of teams coming back, including Frank Harris, like you said. And they got the most returning production in the conference, and it's 23rd overall in the country.
Right.
And with the schedule, Houston, that's a big boost to kick off the season. You take them down, you are riding momentum. That San Antonio, Houston, I mean, you are riding momentum if you beat Houston. I think this team can easily go 10-2 with either losing to Houston and Texas or splitting those matchups and losing one conference game. That's so in my mind, that's a great leeway. You either lose to the two in-state schools, or you split with one of them, and then you just happen to have a mishap in conference. I mean, this team was what 11-0 before North Texas got them last year. I'm pretty sure. So they've
Right.
proven, that they could get through conference play with no problem. And I just think, like you said, that UAB game. Listen, if I was running the cards, I'd have game day there. I mean, that will be the G5. A la the creme, like, or however you say that. Like, that will be a heck of a matchup. That came down to a goal line touchdown from UTSA with like 8 seconds. I think the sequel is going to be phenomenal. And I think both these teams are going to make Conference USA very fun and making picks in that conference easy on me.
Absolutely. That was a hell of a game last year. I was watching that too. That was a great, fantastic G5 football game. Now we're going to go down to Coastal Carolina, back into the Sun Belt. Zach, their win total sitting at an even 8 wins. Who you got?
Do it again and the new look Sunbelt, man. I'm going over. I'm gonna drink the Kool-Aid on the Chanticleers. I mean, yes, they're bottom three in returning production, but among those is Grayson McCall, who's entering his fourth year at Coastal. If McCall wasn't coming back, I would be nervous. But I got full faith in this man at the helm. They've won 22 games over the last 2 years. And honestly, if this was at 9, I'd stay away. But I think 8 is the perfect number. The non-con, it's not really that difficult outside of UVA at the end of the year. And we don't know what UVA will be like. I mean, Brennan Armstrong is a good quarterback. They've overhauled with Tony Elliott taking over. But still, who knows what could happen late in the season. And then you got Georgia Southern and Appalachian State at home. And they're playing James Madison in their first year at FBS. So I just think that gives them a bit of a boost. And that's why I think they did win at least 9.
So I agree with you about Grayson McCall, but I'm actually going to go under here. I am not drinking the Chanticleer Kool-Aid this season, even though I do really like that program. But I will say this about Grayson McCall. He's an absolute stud. He was the FBS leader in all of FBS. He led in adjusted passing yards per attempt and passer efficiency rating. So he's a pretty good quarterback, and a lot of those advanced metrics say that he is good. I think he will find his way onto an NFL roster, whether that's late in the draft. I don't know exactly where his draft protection is when he goes out, but I think he will be an NFL caliber player. The thing that I am bearish on this Coastal Carolina team about, however, is that they lose their 2 leading receivers, and one of those is their tight end, Isaiah Likely. They lost him to the NFL draft. Likely was a huge part of this offense. And they also lost their sack leader from last year, Josiah Stewart. He does return to this defense, but this defense was very bad last year. They were 101 in all of FBS in efficiency last year. So even though they do return their sack leader, it was a very bad defense overall. And this offense really had to carry them last season. So the defense, if this team is going to hit this win total, the defense is going to need to get better, because I just don't see how this offense just replicates what it had last year with Isaiah Likely at tight end. And like you said, they're 125th in returning production overall. Their key games, they got Army at home, Buffalo in the non-con. They go at Marshall, Appalachian State at home, and then, like you said, at UVA and at James Madison near the end of the season there. The biggest thing for me here with this under is just there's a lot of uncertainty for me, and I just don't know how good McCall will be and how productive he will be without Isaiah Likely. So with all that uncertainty, as I said before, when there's uncertainty, I go under. So that's why I have that there. But I could be wrong about this. 8 wins is definitely not that low or that high of a win total, I will say.
And I do want to say it will be interesting to see how this season gives you a retrospect on Coastal and how much of their success was due to the weirdness of that COVID season. I mean, Jamie Chadwell could have jumped into the SEC after that season, and if he has another kind of subpar season at Coastal, you'll kind of start to wonder if maybe his window passed. And that's just an interesting storyline to kind of keep in mind with this Coastal team. moving forward, especially as the McCall era enters its last year.
That is very true. I am kind of surprised that he's still there, but I think we both agree that this team's success really hinges on Grayson McCall. I mean, he's just a stud, and I'm surprised he hasn't left. He could have left. He could have transferred to a Power 5 program, and he hasn't left. So we'll see where that ends up. That is a good storyline. So lastly here for the top G5 schools, we're going to cover Central Michigan. This is our first and only team out of the MAC. We had to give the MAC some love here. Central Michigan with a win total set at 7.5. And this one was pretty fairly easy for me. I have a good lean on this. I'm going to go under here for the Chippewas. They went 9-4 last year. They went on a high note, ending the year with 5 wins in a row. However, they are 112th in returning production, so they don't got a lot of those key players coming back. However, they do have their quarterback, Daniel Richardson, which for a group of 5 quarterback, I thought he was pretty solid. He put up solid numbers there at Central Michigan. But looking at their schedule, the 2 biggest non-conference opponents they have is they got to go at Oklahoma State, and then they got to go at Penn State early in the year. I just don't see them winning both of those. And then also in conference, 2 of their biggest competitors or their strongest competitors in the MAC are Toledo and Northern Illinois, and they got to go at Toledo and at Northern Illinois. I just don't really see this team getting by with 4 wins or less. So I think that you're going to add at least another loss in there. I'm sorry, I don't see them getting by with 4 losses or less. So I see them having at least 5 losses, and that's why I got to go under on the win total.
I'll tell you, John. I clearly missed your text message and had them at 8, but it doesn't change my feeling. It's under. Easy 2 non-con L's against Oak State and Penn State. I'm really hoping the spread gets covered on that one. I mean, heck, they got worked by one of the worst LSU teams in school history last year. But, that was last year, so I'll let that be. But the point is, it's good what you say about the returning production. It seems I have a different number on their returning production, but the point is they're playing Bowling Green, Northern Illinois, Toledo, all have higher numbers in returning production. They would have to go 7-1 in conference play to pull this off. I just don't see that happening. And like you said, they got to go on the road to play NIU and Toledo. And it's interesting what you say about the quarterback. I had thought Jacob Sermon played a bigger role on that team, but I guess not, given how much he was touted. Am I correct in that assessment that he wasn't as big of a contributor as maybe I thought last season? Because I thought them losing him would be a big detriment, but clearly it has no effect, it seems. But regardless if he was, the next Bryce Young, I just don't see this. I see this being a middle of the pack Chippewa team. But don't worry, McElwain will still keep his job and keep trucking. He's right where he needs to be at Central Michigan.
That Central Michigan line, it was at 8 even, and then it jumped down to 7.5. But at the time of this recording, which, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, these lines are all as of what's today's date, June 15th. And these are off of Draftkings. Draftkings was the first book to put out group of 5 win totals. So these are why these lines are based off of that. And if you're depending on when you're watching this video or listening, these lines could have changed, but they change from day to day. A couple of these lines changed just from when I made this graphic to when we started recording. So that just goes to show how much it fluctuates sometimes. But that'll wrap it up here. Thank you guys for watching. And if you're listening, we are going to move on to our best bets segment. We're going to make this another video